Okay. Well, I am more than thrilled to introduce you guys to someone who has inspired me and been a very important influence in my health journey. Mia Lee. Hi.
Hi.
We're going to just chat for a little bit and let you guys listen into our conversation, really about health, about the journey of our life in the modern era, fitness and all that, but also maybe some nutrition. Also, just what does it take to be an entrepreneur in your life, whether you own a business or you want to start a business or you're somewhere in between or you've bought and sold many businesses. One of my favorite quotes about this whole topic is that health is wealth. If you have, lots of commas on your
Mhm.
check register, but you can't get out of bed, or you can't get that migraine headache to go away, you have excruciating back pain. Really, it's like, wow, how much does that matter? And it's like, we want to have the wealth. Of course we do. We all have things we want to do, but also we want to have the vitality and the focus and the energy to bring not only to our business, but to our relationships. For some of you guys who are parents like I am, you're like, hey, I don't want to be the old guy who can't move and have fun and play and do and go and whatever. Some of you may be in a new season of life where you're like, hey, I want to travel. I want to do the adventures, but I'm worried about, this or that thing. Some of you just may want to feel confident in your own skin. And I feel like for a lot of us, it's like, hey, I'm not an athlete was kind of a lie that got lodged in maybe way back in the day. And it's like, hey, you are an athlete. You totally can be capable in all the ways that you want to be without winning a Super Bowl or an NBA finals. But to say, hey, for me, this is the kind of life and the experience that I want to have. So welcome, Mia, with that introduction. Maybe let's start with this. Tell us just a little bit about your journey and kind of how you've gotten to where you're at in terms of your fitness and your outlook on life.
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on here. Um, I've grown up like very active as part of how we grew up, like hiking and biking and just being outside. So that was always kind of in me. And then I guess around COVID time is when or it was probably pre-COVID. Anyway, I wanted to make a transition. I wanted to become a personal trainer, just to help people because I felt like fitness helped me in my personal life, my emotional life, and spiritually every aspect of my life changed with fitness. So I got certified, and then I started training people. And then shortly after that, I started my baking business for Bake Steak. I feel like it's like a balance. So I have a big sweet tooth, but I also love to work out. So um,
Yes, we're going to give everybody contact info in a minute, but oh my gosh, every time I get a box from Mia in the mail, I'm just like, oh, and everyone's going to fight over it. And I'm like, it's mine. It's like, yeah, it's such a great treat.
I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I just started prioritizing my like waking up early, meditating, journaling, making sure I took my electrolytes, my greens, and just making it like a habit. And so it kind of just became part of who I was. Because at first it was kind of hard. Like one day to go to the gym, the next day I wouldn't go, and so I just wasn't like I didn't feel right. So I just made it a point. I would set reminders on my phone. I would like write out my to-do list the next morning just to make sure I would stay like
Okay.
intact.
I was going to
Um,
ask you about that, Mia. So maybe speak to this a little bit. A lot of us maybe want to make a change, right? And then we kind of try to start it. And then, like you said, we kind of get crushed by life. Like you mentioned your phone, you mentioned kind of a to-do list. As you were getting started, what did you find worked for you, or what have you found works for your clients that you train to get them into maybe more of a routine or more structure?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me is I write out my to-do list. Like I have to actually write it out. I have a to-do list on my phone, but when I write it out and I have it like next to my bedside or I bring it in the kitchen in the morning and I'm crossing those things off, it's like I feel like I'm accomplished and then I know like right after the gym I have to go do like X, Y, and Z. And like that's my schedule and anything like, nothing's gonna throw it off. And then I also have reminders on my phone because like I feel like we for me, I get distracted easy and so I just need like constant reminders, you know?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, for sure.
yeah, so those two things I think are the biggest things. And I feel like once like, let's say like a month goes by, 2 months goes by, then it just feels right that I'm doing those things. So I still do those things, but I already know like that's what's coming next. Like nothing else like matters. You know what I mean? So it's like that can come afterwards. Like I have my schedule. and I just feel better. I don't know. When I keep those promises to myself, I just like feel better as a person. And that's kind of what motivates me to stay on track.
Okay, so let's do this. So a lot of people will say, I want to get in shape because I want to look a certain way. I want to wear a certain outfit, or I want to hit some sort of a goal in terms of performance. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Let me ask you this question. You mentioned a couple of times how you feel. Talk about the role of how a person feels when they're starting to get into shape, or they're starting to maybe even get out of what Founders Fire we call time debt, which is what you're describing. It's like, hey, if I've made a promise to myself, I'm going to keep it. My schedule has integrity. It's not just everything comes in all the time and I just have to respond. There's a little bit more intentionality with how I'm doing things. Maybe describe what that role has been like for you in terms of the feeling. Like, as opposed to fitness so you look a certain way, or fitness so you can do, 10 pull-ups or whatever. What about the feeling part of it? How's that been for you?
I feel like a lot of people start off with the goal of saying like, well, I want to look like sexy in a bikini or whatnot. But like, it's almost like, I feel like it needs to be a little bit deeper than that, because then it's just like, you're going on a trip and it's like, okay, after the trip, then I'm just going to go back to my old ways. And then it's like, why did you even put the work in for, like, what was the point? I feel like that's why I feel like fitness is more of like a spiritual thing. It's like more of the relationship you have with yourself, and like becoming fit and looking great and feeling comfortable in your body is like a perk that comes with it. Yeah. Where was I going with that?
Well, what I'll ask you, I'll add something to it while you're thinking. You mentioned meditating and like having, that time. So part of what I'm hearing is like, it is how you feel. It is like becoming a part of who you are. It is, of course, we do all want to look great, and that's great. That's fine. But it's also the spiritual side. Maybe talk a little bit about that. You said like of the relationship that you have with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that's what I've kind of like noticed like over the years is like the relationship we have with ourselves, like the respect we have for ourselves and the boundaries that we create for ourselves. It really helps you like find who you are. And so then like once you have that down, I kind of feel like your non-negotiables, your boundaries, and it's like you have those like respects for yourself, and so anything else that you put out, I feel like you attract that same energy. So yeah, so I just started waking up, like meditating, and then like in that meditation, after I meditate, I like visualize like what my goal is, like for the month, for the day, or like certain things I want to attract into my life. And I guess I just became more intentional. And I kind of wasn't intentional before. I kind of was just like all over the place. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I was like, no, like I need to have like a structured routine. And I love that. Like I need structure. So I thrive off of it. So I feel like sitting down and like being like real with yourself and making like what are your goals? Like write down what your goals are, even if they're small or large, whatever it is, right? Like write down like a goal for the month, whether it's like to drink like a gallon of water a day, something small, and it's kind of just like build off of it. And then once you do that, then you feel like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit stronger, I feel better. And then you can be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna eat sweets every single day. I'll do them like once a week. And you kind of just give yourself like
permission to go on the For Baked Sake website and buy
and order some cookies, right? Like you give yourself,
like,
I don't know, yeah, like you like reward yourself like every day. Like it's not like you like walk outside and grab the mail. Great, you get
right.
like I feel like you need.
Well, it's my Spartan race goodie, so I know like, hey, once I get that finisher medal, then I'm going, and I got my phone. I'm like, here comes my
well deserved.
Exactly. Let's talk about that for a second, because fuel is a big part of our life, and unfortunately today, like so much of our food has so much stuff in it that we don't even know about. When I first started kind of my journey, which is probably not totally dissimilar from kind of your timeline. For me, it was like 2017 into 2018. And then of course, COVID hit a year and a half or so later. But one thing that I started doing was substituting. And so it was like, hey, what do you eat for lunch every day? Well, I go to Wendy's and I get a chicken sandwich that's fried with mayonnaise, and I get fries and ketchup and a Dr. Pepper. And one thing that kind of popped into my, kind of worldview at the time was, how about just do Sprite instead of Dr. Pepper. It's got less sugar or no sugar. It's got less caffeine or no caffeine. But it's still pop, it's still soda, it's still whatever, right? But it's just maybe not as hard on your system. And then eventually that became, hey, just water, and then
Yeah.
the fried chicken sandwich became grilled chicken. And then it became, I can't really eat at Wendy's anymore. It doesn't, when I eat it, it tastes good for about a minute or two or three, but my body is telling me something. And it's like, I feel like part of the revelation for me was that we have a silent partner in our journey on our life. And that partner, we're speaking to it up through about age 4 or 5. And we play and we tumble and we crawl and we put everything in our mouth. And it's like, there's no separation between me and my body when I'm a kid, right? But somewhere around maybe age 5 or 6 or 7, we start sitting down for school and we start getting brainy and everything starts to become verbal and everything becomes social. And it's kind of like our best friend is kind of like, hey, what about me? And if we get into athletics or something, there's maybe a reconnection. For me, I actually had to do some apologizing. Like I had to just sit there, speaking of meditation, and just say, I am so sorry. Like I have literally not been listening to you for a decade or I was in the Army previously, so I was in pretty good shape when I got out of the Army. But in that intervening, window of time, and I just had to just ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness, and to say, yeah, you do. You need to own it. You need to apologize because you have been eating for pleasure and for the sensation of being full in the moment. And I've been saying this is not the fuel we need to do your epic calling, to go on your epic journey in life. Is there anything wrong with eating McDonald's or fast food? No, it's not like it's a moral thing, but ultimately it can become where it's like, you just don't put Kool-Aid into a Ferrari. If you want to drive a Ferrari, you got to fuel it correctly. And I think for a lot of us, we kind of feel like you said, we don't know maybe what to eat or what not to eat or kind of how to do that. For me, it was just that first little idea of like, well, just swap something out, don't stop doing it.
Great way to start.
Yeah, but maybe just, can you talk about that just a little bit, what you've seen work or what your thoughts are on how to handle diet or that side of things?
Yes. So I feel like when I was younger, I had a very high metabolism and I was able to like eat McDonald's like at 2, 3 in the morning and then wake up and I was like, fine. Right. And I never gained any weight and it was crazy. But then I feel like when
wait a minute, bring him back. Hey, we have a friend. I love dogs. Oh, hi there. Hi. Oh my gosh, you're beautiful.
He's so cute. He just turned 5.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, you're welcome anytime.
But yeah, I feel like I when I was like 25, I started to notice that like I just didn't feel as good, and then I noticed like my body wasn't reacting to the food the same, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start eating healthy. I'm gonna start like doing protein shakes, and I'm gonna like stop eating like fast food, right? And just to see how I feel. And so then I stopped eating fast food, and I'll do like In-N-Out sometimes. I like In-N-Out, but like I haven't eaten McDonald's in years, and I just feel like you eat it and then like an hour later it's like you're never satiated enough after you eat it, so you eat a ton of calories and then you feel so like heavy and like not a good head. Like I want to feel light, I want to feel energized after I eat, and I just started realizing that. So that, and along with alcohol too, I stopped. Like I'm not a huge drinker. I'll have like a cocktail or a glass of wine, but like my body does not like it. Like physically, if I have like more than one glass, I'll start to get stuffy, and the next morning like my whole day is ruined. And it's like, for what? I can have a great time without any of that. But I obviously have a big sweet tooth, so I think that's my weakness. Like I can eat like very clean. I can do like a protein, a veggie, and a healthy carb. But when it comes to dessert, I just have to be super careful. So I honestly like to do like lots of fruit and like yogurt and honey. I feel like that's my go-to.
Well, don't you feel like it's, again, I love the whole archetypal or evolutionary process to biology. It's like, yes, we're not out hunting for our food. Yes, we're not living in a debris shelter. And I get all that stuff. But I also feel like there is something about staying connected to that at a certain level. I think
Mhm.
for men in particular, there's something about needing to feel capable. You know, like if Safeway or Whole Foods or Kroger or whatever your grocery store is, in whatever part of the world you're hearing this from, you know, if it just shut down tomorrow, would you just be like, oh my gosh, I have no capacity to take care of myself? If the police, you know, can't respond, you know, to wherever you are in an hour, you
Yeah.
know, or the fire department, I do feel like there's something about the inherent need to feel capable. And again, I know it's different for different people, it's different for different genders, but at the core of it, it's like, hey, I don't want a fundamental insecurity around something. And in that whole topic, as it relates to diet, I can't remember who was saying this recently. I heard a podcast. Someone was saying, you know, you only got sugar when you climbed up the tree and got stung by the bees and you got the
Oh,
honey nest, right? Or
yeah.
you worked really hard and you got the fruit, you know, or whatever it would
And
be.
now sugar's in everything we eat pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And we just don't realize it. I mean, somebody told me that, hey, you were putting that ketchup on your hamburger. Do you know how much sugar's in the ketchup? I'm like, there's no sugar in ketchup. You know,
Yeah.
it's like vinegar and whatever else is in there. And you spin it around, you look at the label and you're like, what is the second ingredient or what, right? You're like, oh my gosh. And I used to just be like so like judgmental about people like looking at labels and portion control and serving size. And I'm like, that's so ridiculous and legalistic and crazy. And it's like, well, actually, you know, and I think it's like you said, it's not about the rule, but it is about being intentional. You know, like I know that, like, for example, right now, this is refined in my life to a very high degree. I'm not going to eat any of the oils that are inflammatory oils, the
Yeah.
saffron oil, the sunflower oil. Like, you know, it's like, oh, it's my favorite bag of organic potato chips, but it actually has a bunch of bad oils in it. And it's like, yeah, the oil stays in you a lot longer, causes problems. And again, it's never from a place of like legalism or like, you know, rule following, but it is from what you said. It's like, hey, how do you feel? You know, I heard Thich Nhat Hanh share this amazing quote. He was like, if you want to quit smoking, you should drop the idea that you want to quit smoking. You should drop it totally. And every time you smoke, you should only do smoking. Like you should have the most mindful smoking that you ever have done, and just keep doing that. And if you don't go on autopilot when you smoke, and fill in the blank for smoking, right? When you
Yeah.
do the thing that's not great, if you'll just stay present with it and keep listening, you'll find out whether your body is like, that's awesome for me, keep doing it, or like, hey, I don't think we should. Yeah, it's like we don't have to bring the judgment, we just have to stay in the conversation, you know. And so I love what you're saying about like, hey, there's the sweet, and it's like it's awesome, because for me, I feel like it matters that we do have that moment. If it was just all raw vegetables and organ meat, yeah, okay, your labs would probably look great, and your body is probably going to perform really well. But also, we're emotional. You know, we want to eat with people. You know, we don't. Again, I've tried to not eat while I'm watching something. You know, it's like there's a little bit of sacredness or ceremony. You know, not every single meal, and yes, sometimes I eat in the
Well,
car.
yeah, because you want to be like mindful with your eating. You're going to be watching TV, and then after you finish eating, you're going to still feel like you're hungry because you weren't like aware of what you were eating. So yeah, totally.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so let's do this. So dieting, a big part of it, the spiritual part, obviously crucial, and integrated and intentional life. Let's talk about maybe from the standpoint of healthy thinking, and again, fitness and food and all that, awesome. But let's look at it as for you as an entrepreneur, for you as someone's like, hey, I've got a job. And I want to launch out. I want to do something on my own. It's exactly my story. I had a job and it was okay. And it was paying the bills, sort of. And I was like, you know, but it's the fire is not getting, you know, blown into the furnace. It's just dwindling. It might even go out. And
Yeah.
I want to take that leap. And I think I want to head out there. Talk about some of the feelings that you had, the thoughts that you had, maybe the emotions around and that decision. And then like, how did you work through that? How did you navigate those waters?
Yeah, so I worked in hospitality, like, for the past, like, let's say 10 years prior to starting for Baked Steak. And I just feel like, yes, it's great to interact with people. I have, great customer service skill. Like, I gained a lot from that, right? But I feel like that chapter was closed many years ago, and I just was maybe too afraid to take the leap and is to do this full time. But I would just go into work every day, and it's like so unfulfilling. I'm leaving and I feel like, okay, I should be doing more, and I just like was not happy. Like literally, I just did not feel happy, like something was missing, right? Now that I'm doing this full time, like I will be up from like 6 in the morning, working till 7 at night. And I am just like so happy and feel filled. And I have like a huge smile on my face, like cleaning and packaging and everything. And I'm like, this is what it's about. This is what makes me happy. And I am so happy that I chose to make the decision to do that. And obviously, yeah, it's scary, but I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Like if it doesn't work out, that's fine. Like jobs will always be there, right? Like, but like doing this for myself is something that I feel like I've always wanted to do. And I feel like you just have to do it. I don't know. I feel like sometimes you just don't need to overthink things, and you just need to just follow like your intuition, your gut, and just go with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, don't overthink it. I mean, just that, right? We all know
I
that.
think it's thing like overthinking
Oh,
just like kills. I feel like so.
it does for sure. It does. Well, so if somebody were like following in your footsteps and they're like, hey, they're kind of like entrenched in their job and they have their obligations and what's going on in their life, but they're like, hey, I'm feeling unfulfilled, but I'm not sure what direction to go in. Do you have any thoughts about kind of how you figured out what direction to go in, or maybe advice that you'd share with people thinking about, jumping out of the airplane without the parachute and like, oh my gosh, did I just do this?
Yeah. Do you mean like in what like in me finding that like I'm passionate about baking and fitness?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I guess like people would always ask me like, oh, what are you passionate about? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what like lights your fire inside? And I always got so uncomfortable when they would ask me that because I felt like I didn't know. I was like, I don't know. I like to like eat and travel. Like it was just like it wasn't like I didn't know how to answer the question. And not until I just it's almost like I spent more time with myself. Like I found who I was inside. And how did I do that? I guess like just from doing things that made me happy. Like I like was like, what makes me happy? Like I love to go on runs. I love to go to the gym. Like I love just to be inside my head. And I feel like going on those long runs let me do that. And then I love to bake. I love to like create fun things that remind me of my childhood or things like in my adulthood that I bring with the childhood. That made me happy. And so I was like, those things make me happy. Like, what if I turned that into like a job? And I remember like all the doubt was like, oh God, I have to make an Instagram page. I have to make a website. Like, what if no one follows me? Like, what if everyone hates my baked goods? Like, it was just like so much self-doubt, And I'm just like, I think it was after my mom passed away that I was like, all right, life is way too short. And I think we kind of get caught up thinking like we're never going to die. And like, this lasts forever. And we have so much time, but like, we're not promised anything. So I think that's what kind of like, changed me and made me, grow in a certain way. And I'm forever grateful for that. But yeah, and then I just was like, okay, fitness is my thing. Like I'm going to become a personal trainer and I can help people. And then I was like, baking's my thing. If I can, bake some cookies and bring happiness to someone's home or, after a shitty day or for a party, like then I would feel happy and fulfilled. And that's my passion is baking delicious treats and making people happy and come together through dessert. It's crazy, but I mean, it does. Like if you're going to go to someone's house, like you bring bottle of wine, you bring some kind of dessert, like whatever it is. And it just creates like togetherness. And I feel like I love that. And if I can do that, then, I'm accomplished.
That's awesome. That's so great. What I hear in all that, I just try to unpack some of that is that first of all, there's a passion. There's something that's already true. And I love this idea that the purposes of the human heart are like deep waters, but a person of understanding draws them out. It's like it is already in you. And I feel like that's something that is not really reinforced as much as it could be. It's like, hey, you don't have to go out there. You don't have to copy someone else. You don't have to, you know what I mean? It's like the comparison is just killer. It's just like, it's just going to crush you. Like, oh, look at her, look at him, look at this, look at that. But you went inside. And what I heard you say was on some of those long runs, I will say this November, we were just talking about before we started recording, we're both going to be doing races. And this November will be my third time doing an ultra marathon. And what an absolute amazing time of meditation it is. Yes, you're running and yes, it's hard. And for those of you who are like, I don't run around the block. Like, what are you talking about? Look, it really is not about the athletic part of it. Here's what it is for me. yes, there is a rhythm, obviously, because you're running, right? But there also starts to be an internal conversation that comes. And like you said, kind of getting to know yourself, like really, it's not selfishness. It's like, hey, there is that silent partner. There is that person inside of me that is always there. Some people would say it's your spirit or your true self or your soul or whatever, but it's like, hey, if I don't actually get in alignment with that, I am just going to chase money or fame or approval or whatever it is, and it won't be fulfilling. For me, when I was 19, I was performing at the Lincoln Center in New York City, and I was on stage. And this dates me a little bit, but not a little bit. This dates me a lot. But Madonna was in the audience, and
Aw.
Martina Navratilova was in the audience, and like if you're listening to this, you're like, who are those people? I'm sorry, I'm old, but anyway, it was a big deal. And at 19, to be on that stage, but I walked out of that performance onto the street in New York City back in the day when there were payphones. And I remembered standing by a payphone and thinking, is this it? And I felt so guilty. I was like, people work their whole lives and never perform in a venue like this. And you're 19, you're a snot-nosed kid, and you're just like, is this all there is? But I think the answer was like, hey, this is an important part of your journey, but this is not where you're going. And to have the courage and the introspection to go, that's true, that there's something not in alignment. So I feel like what you're sharing with us is so valuable, because you're saying, hey, if you're going to take that leap, it's got to line up with who you are. It's got to line up with what's deep inside you. Even for getting in shape, it can't just be your six-pack abs or, having biceps or being able to run a 5-minute mile. It's like, hey, it has to mean something to you. And then when it does, it doesn't matter what it looks like or what the number is. And I'll tell you though, it'll get better. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? It's still gonna improve. But again, I think mostly it's the feeling of health is a feeling of alignment and capability, and knowing, hey, I don't know everything, but I know that I'm on the right track right now. Like that has that settled feeling. So you model that so well, just in how you speak about what you're doing and who you are. And I know everyone can get that, just from our conversation. Maybe as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, talk about some ideas that you might share with folks around, hey, I've done some work to try to find out, where I really need to go, what really aligns with me. And I'm really clear on it. Like I really do have a strong sense of what it is, but I just don't see maybe the logistic part working. Like I don't have enough money in savings maybe to launch out of this business. Or maybe it's someone who is in business and they know they're not in the right business. And they're like, hey, I know this isn't really the right direction for me, but I am just like, holy moly, I kind of don't know how to even begin the process, because it seems like there's such a barrier. Maybe it's money, maybe it's time. What are your thoughts on that? How would you approach,
I think the biggest thing is to like be kind to yourself and be patient with yourself, and like just understand that you, like, everyone starts from somewhere. I think that's something that I'm still learning, and I still learn with myself, because I feel like I'm like, okay, I'm so happy that I've grown, this much, but I still want this much more. And then I'm like hard on myself. I'm like, I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing this enough. And I think like the biggest thing is to sit down and be like, okay, like literally look in the mirror and be like, I'm proud of you. You're doing great. Like you've made, you've hit this goal, you've done that. And like, and it's okay. And like, I think just having like having like a plan, a goal, or some kind of like this is where I am, but I want to be here. Like, where's my end point at? Like, where do you see yourself? And it can be vague for the beginning, but I think that constantly having new goals for yourself, and they can be anything, obviously, just depending on what you want to achieve. And then just being nice to yourself. I think like that's the biggest thing, is like being so like, you have to remember to be nice to yourself. Like the self-talk, like it needs to be positive. You can't have like this negative self-talk. And I feel like that's helped me a lot. It's just being like, as if I was like they say, like talk to yourself like you're talking to your younger self, or to your little daughter, or to your younger sister. And don't forget, like, you matter, right? And like you have feelings, and that it's like a journey, it's a process. And I think that's the hardest thing is to understand, like it is a process. And I think that's like where all the growth and all like the adversity, everything, like that's where it comes from, is the process, you know, not the beginning, not the end, but like in the middle, like where you find yourself and find what matters. And I would just give that advice, and don't forget to be kind to yourself and just take your time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Mia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.